Hello everyone, welcome back for the second episode of the Riga Grand Prix chess final. I'm Grandmaster Max Illingworth and I'll take you through game 2 of this final. And I'm not going to spoil the result just yet because not all of you may have seen who the winner was of this final in the FIDE Grand Prix in Riga. So let me share with you this game between Maxime Vachier Lagrave as white against Shakhriyar Mamedyarov playing as black. And if you watch the first video, you'll already know that Shak won the first game and therefore only needed a draw to win the second game, to win this match. So, as it was, the game went as follows. We had e4 by MVL. So both sides basically played their usual openings with e5, knight f3, knight c6. And white played their Gyurko piano with bishop c4, bishop c5, and after c3 and knight f6, he played this move d3. So it's a very solid way to start the game, and all of you might be thinking, well, shouldn't white play something more aggressive right from the outset if he's in a must-win game? However, an approach of most of the world's top players when they're in a must-win situation is that they'll kind of just play normally and try to play an opening which will sort of guarantee a long battle where your opponent can't just easily, say, exchange pieces or just force a draw. So that's the idea with the Gyurko piano system, that it's going to lead to a very slow-paced sort of game in general. So after d6 and castles, black played this move of h6, which it's a slightly unusual move order compared to, let's say, castles, for example. But it can be useful if, for example, black wants to avoid some bishop g5 lines. There are a lot of different move orders in this opening. It can be a little confusing to get your head around, as I know from personal experience. But in this game, I decided just to play it sort of like an Italian game, but with the bishop on c4 rather than b5. Now, I do have a lot of interesting moments to get to in this game, so I'll fast forward a little bit. We had castles. White played h3. You can also start with knight bd2. And in fact, after black's move a5, that is what white played. Knight to d2 in this position. And the reason we're playing a5 here rather than, say, a6 is that A, you stop white playing b4 to attack the black bishop, and B, that pawn may also give black some space, where a4 is in fact a reasonable move for black here. But in the game, black played the main line of bishop to e6, and it's all pretty standard theory at a high level. There are many games by Ding Liren, for example, playing with the black pieces here. So white played bishop b5. It's worth noting just quickly that black is generally happy to see bishop e6, as it gives his rook a nice half-open h-file. And the knight can come to f4, using a fact that it's not so easy to kick that knight away from this square. So instead, white played bishop to b5, and if you don't know what the theoretical move is here for black, then the next move might surprise you a little bit. But it turns out that the move queen b8 is a very logical one, with the idea of playing queen a7 and making it much harder for white to get in his d4 pawn break, which is typically what white aims to do in these Gyurko piano middle games. So we had knight to f1, queen a7, and white played the move bishop to e3 in this position, just to trade off black's active bishop and nullify the battery on this diagonal. So black played bishop takes e3, white played knight takes, and here it could be a little bit annoying if there was a later d4 and d5 pawn fork on the knight and bishop. So in the Italian game, you'll often see this maneuver of knight e7, with the idea of bringing the knight to g6 and kind of having a very harmonious setup on the king side, from which knight maybe can even go to f4 for some aggressive intent in the future. So the game saw a4, and here Shak played a somewhat unusual move. One thing to keep in mind is that this was quite a long tournament, so you're just seeing the final here, but the players played many classical games and tie-break matches against strong players already. So I think this is why the game was, maybe I'd say not a perfect game in that sense, but certainly is a very exciting one despite this slow start. So rather than playing the natural knight g6, which has quite a lot of theory to it, based on some engine games, Though I would say that, for example, after bishop c4, after something like bishop takes and, for example, queen a6, objectively I think black must be doing fine in this position, but it's slightly tricky for black to come up with a good plan, as I know from personal experience. For example, even a move like g3 can sort of kill the knight f4 idea, and black would have to resort to slower plans such as rook e8 and slowly trying to prepare the d5 break in the center, while trying to make it harder for white to go d4 and take a central space advantage himself. So this is something I guess that high-rated players watching us will want to investigate this position a lot more deeply for sure, because I think that we will see a lot more games with this position after knight g6 in the near future. However, in the game, black played rook a d8 instead, and I'm not sure there's anything particularly wrong with this move, but it does somehow feel more precise to start with knight g6. Because I think it's a move that we kind of know we want to play anyway to defend our pawn and prepare d5. So I played bishop c4, which is kind of a tactical retreat to anticipate c6, bishop c4, and d5 with a tempo, which could potentially give black an initiative. So black played bishop takes c4, and I think in this position here, it's one of these cases where if you know you only need a draw, it can be a little bit psychologically difficult to play, because there isn't really a fast way to trade pieces or to simplify the position. And I think in this position, black probably should have played knight to g6 here. Although here I think white could perhaps get a small advantage where actually this position could make a reasonable sort of planning exercise, where what would you consider to be a promising plan for white in this position? And this one you might like to pause the video and think about for a bit. So there are a few ideas, but I would probably suggest the b4 plan as perhaps being the way to go to try and open up the queen side and try and push these pawns forward, get some initiative that way. On the other hand, you could also make a case for a move like g3 and trying to bring the knight towards this direction, which might also give white a small pull potentially. So anyway, it's something we could explore a lot further, but let's get to the exciting part. So I had knight to d7, and here I think knight d7 was a little bit passive, where maybe black's idea was to play f5, but I think here the move that white played is quite decent, to just play d4 and to sort of take that space in the center. It is true white could also have prepared it, but I think d4 is a move that white wants to play in general. So after d4, black played this move of queen a6, which I think is not the best because it just allows white to get the knight to a better square anyway, with knight to e3. So in this position, what do you think might be a better move for black in this position? Pause the video if you need more time to think about it. So here my suggestion would be to play rook fe8 as black. And the point is that it's not really a threat for white to take on e5. So if d takes e5, we can take with the pawn. And white's clearly not threatening to take because of the discovered attack by the rook after, say, knight takes and knight takes e5. So instead, I think, yeah, white should probably just keep the tension, and it might be slightly better with some developing move, such as queen d2 or something. But certainly the game goes on, and black will be able to keep a solid position. Perhaps a move like knight to g6, for instance. So in the game, black played queen a6, white played knight to e3, and black played this move of rook fe8, just trying to keep as solid as possible here. It turns out you could also make a case for knight f6 and sort of try to attack this pawn. I think the reason black probably didn't play this because after queen c2, he's probably not so sure how to defend this pawn. And I mean, you could play knight to g6, for example. But then after g3, the knight again, sort of lacks scope, and white would keep a pleasant advantage. Most likely with some idea of knight to f5 in the near future, where knight has a fairly stable post. So black went rook fe8, and it's all you can notice in general about these positions is that white just has a more flexible structure. It's not that easy for black to kind of find the best places for his knights as such. White played the move queen to c2 here, and yeah, it's sort of an interesting idea to keep the piece tension. But I do feel like you could make a good case for a move like b4 as well, just with the idea of kind of grabbing more space on the queen side. So if black takes, I think you could sort of say that, the c-pawn could be a little bit weak on c7. And we also have moves like b5 to kind of kick the queen and just sort of take away more squares from the black pieces. So I do think b4 would be quite a promising idea. Now after queen to c2, yeah, this is an interesting position where I'll set as a two-part sort of exercise. So black played the move e takes d4 in this position. So my first question is, should black have played this move? Okay, actually I have 3 questions. So first question is, should black have played e takes d4? The second question is, how should white take back with the pawn or the knight? And the third question is, if you're not playing e takes d4 as black, what move would you play instead? So I'll answer these questions in the next video, so I'll see you there.